Good afternoon, happy Sunday, and welcome back into the Zig Zone, BG Falcon Media's flagship sports talk radio show where we take you through everything going on in the world of Bowling Green athletics. It's our first show in 2 weeks here as we took the last Sunday off to stay in safe from the snow and elements a little bit. First time in a while that we've had one off during the semester, but we are back and plenty to talk about still. Busy weekend for hockey, some tough games for both basketball teams, so we're going to break all of that down here today. I'm joined today by two talented analysts from the Falcon Media Sports Network, and I believe our sole two former hockey players in the Sports Network, if I'm not mistaken. So Nathan Burkett. Nathan, how you doing?
Can't complain.
And Dan Ridenour, I think your first time in the studio for the show?
That would be correct,
yeah,
yes.
First time
Thank
on
you
the
for
show
having
for Dan,
me, yeah.
So glad to have you here, buddy.
Thank you for having me and all that. Going to be a fun show, and we're going to get to it.
As always, the Zig Zone is a production of BG Falcon Media, WBGU 88.1 FM, and the Falcon Media Sports Network. So we're going to jump right into it. You know, I teased it a little bit, talking about both of your backgrounds. We're going to be talking about a lot of hockey today. Hockey's kind of the big ticket this time of year, especially with the results in basketball, which we will get to.
Eventually.
But I want to talk about hockey first. I think it's what everyone should want to talk about first. So before I dive into the weekend, the ins and outs, the results on the ice, you know, what's happened off the ice now, since then, let's just talk about the atmosphere. Mm-hmm. Because I know you were both there. I was there at the Slater Family Ice Arena yesterday, and it was bumping.
Especially during the shootout last night, that was one of the loudest environments I've ever seen. Both me and Dan have been going to the Slater Family Ice Arena since we were little kids, but that was right up there with the good old years of Coach Bergeron and going to the NCAA tournament. So honestly, it might be even louder. Like, that was truly insane. I know in the press conference after the game, Coach Williams mentioned that Curtis Carr told him, and Curtis Carr has been here since 2019-ish. Mm-hmm. So he mentioned that, according to Willie, Kurt said that was the loudest Curtis Carr has ever heard the arena.
And I would believe that. Just, you know, Nathan, I know you made the trip. Dan, I know you were in the studio here, so you could, kind of hear some of it as well. But members of our org represented, down or over, I should say, in South Bend for the first night of the series against Notre Dame. And, it's a really nice venue there, the Compton Family Ice Arena, really nice facility. Mm-hmm. But for a sold-out game, as they advertised it, the atmosphere and the noise was nothing compared to the Slater last night. It was not even close.
It really was. As Burkett just mentioned here moments ago, been going since little kids. I've been going to the Slate for 12, 13 years now. And you think about moments that stand out. I would give that Notre Dame top 3 all time. It's definitely fighting for that number 1 spot, and you got to think about those two. Those other 2 in the top 3 are playoff games, so you're kind of just fighting a regular season game with that, and especially non-conference on top of that, and just away from the game itself. You look at just the traditions that were there, the who's he, nobody. The student section has changed very little ever since I was going as a little kid, as a fan and all that, but I think something in particular, and I think you'll get an enjoyment out of this too, Holden, the first intermission was absolutely phenomenal. And you're involved in the Falcon Marching Band yourself, so just I think seeing the band on the ice was one of my favorite parts of the entire night.
Yeah, that was one, I knew through the channels, the people I know in the marching band, their directors, I knew that was the thing that was happening with the athletic band, but still seeing it in action, that's unreal. Who, not only to go onto the ice and play, they could have immediately turned around, but they played like 3 songs out on the ice. Big shout out to our A band, the Orange Band, for the hockey games, because that was electric. What school is doing it like that? Sending that big of a marching band too. You've got schools that their entire marching band is that size, and that's like maybe a third of Bowling Green's. Obviously, I want to give a shout out to my guys and girls in the marching band, but the atmosphere, the noise. I think a Bowling Green penalty kill was probably a louder reaction at the Slater yesterday than a Notre Dame goal was on Friday. I don't think that's an exaggeration.
Yeah, me and Kevin were in the writing section of the press area, and I remember we were talking about a sellout crowd, and I was like, I don't know, Kevin, empty seat, empty seat, empty seat. It wasn't like they were just hiding. I don't think that was full sellout. I'll be honest for the Notre Dame. And also, I found something out on their website. If you go to their stats page, I know Ben was talking about how they average about 5,100 fans, so actually a little bit over their, what's the word?
Capacity.
that's not home games. That average, that's between home and away games. So their away games are averaging around 6,000 fans at those away games, and their home games are averaging in like the 4,000s. So they take those two numbers, so they're averaging that much overall. That's not their home game average.
It's a fun tidbit. Obviously, you know, our purpose here is recapping BG sports and not just, you know, dunking on other programs. But it is funny.
Yeah, I just thought it was funny.
It's less about what any other program is not doing, but it's more just a credit. I mean, this community and this university just, I mean, you know, you can't embrace a team much more than that.
Exactly. And considering, too, South Bend is roughly, 2.5 hours away?
About a 2.5 hour trip, yeah.
Exactly. And I mean, while I was board hopping, our little crew had the game on, and just you'd see like plots of orange like everywhere. It seemed like at some moments there was more orange than there was either blue or gold or anything like that too. And just considering the size too, because I mean obviously Notre Dame gets more national recognition than Bowling Green does. A very
prominent brand, yeah.
Exactly, but you got to consider too. I was talking to one of my friends who goes there. Bowling Green has around 18,000 students. Notre Dame has half that. So to think just consideration on the size difference and what it means. But overall, just to kind of recap my point, just seeing those fans travel out there, you're seeing a lot more of orange than you do. And just behind the BG bench, you just see orange everywhere, and a couple other notable guests as well.
Yeah, and I'll tell you what, after Friday's game at the Compton Family Ice Arena, a very scuffed, as some people might say, a very weird impromptu press conference, basically in the hallway right outside the locker room doors. You know, media couldn't go through those doors. So Quinn Emerson and Coach Williams both had to just like post up basically on this brick wall, as you can see if you look on YouTube from the athletics, BGSU athletics page on YouTube. And
Niedermeyer took advantage of that.
Yeah, Niedermeyer pranks Emerson. We'll talk about that in a minute. But even so, I mean, you know, you could tell, talking to both, I mean, there was a lot of excitement to get back to the Slater. You know, it's always a cool environment to travel on the road. But, you know, there's no place like home, especially for this team with the crowds being as good as they are. I mean, you can't tell me that doesn't, you know, give you a boost on the ice out there, for sure. To Nathan's point, before Quinn Emerson's press conference, Jackson Niedermeyer came out with a towel covered in shaving cream and right in the face. I mean, he was covered. It was like a really long pause as he kind of tried to get cleaned up. You know, everyone was kind of laughing, you know, waiting for him. The teammates were walking past. Hey, looking good, Quinner, you know, whatever. And then Emerson, in a great moment of humor, was like, I'm sorry, what was the question? Like, you know, a couple minutes later after the dust settled, so to speak. So funny moment there for sure from the guys. But regardless, you know, ignoring the ice, you know, a really exciting weekend, a great weekend for Bowling Green hockey, you know, just from like the, you know, community, cultural, you know, team support impact. That in mind, let's get to the ice, because between the two teams, you couldn't, I mean, Notre Dame took it to them, and I mean, you couldn't have had a much more evenly matched weekend, truly. I mean, you split the weekend, a shootout win for Bowling Green on Friday, a shootout win for Notre Dame on Saturday. So, you know, each taking that shootout winner in the other's barn. But, I mean, on the record, you know, a tie in both cases, maybe a little bit, you know, disappointing. I got the vibe from Coach Williams on Friday that, you know, a coach can't come out and, you know, say things like, yeah, we're a better team and we didn't, you know, blah, blah, blah. But, I mean, I get the vibe that that's the level of confidence that the Falcons have in themselves. You know, I don't think... And, I mean, you know, I'll open it to you guys. I don't think the Falcons were outmatched in any particular way besides maybe just raw physical size against the Irish. What are your thoughts? I mean,
yeah, I do want to give Notre Dame credit. The fans there, they did travel also to BG. They had a good section, and everyone we talked to was very nice. But, yeah, honestly, this is just my takeaway. Coach Willie seemed more annoyed after the Friday night shootout win than he did after a shootout loss on Saturday. He seemed really happy. Maybe that's because he was in, obviously, your home rink. He wasn't against the wall during the press conference. He had a nice chair to sit in. He didn't have to hold a microphone. But he seemed like kind of annoyed after the Falcon win on or shootout win on Friday, and he was super happy talking to all the reporters on Saturday.
Well, the thing, too, I think mainly about Saturday is, I mean, the only kind of inconvenience he had, as you mentioned in the press conference, was he was a little past his bedtime. But either way, I mean, beyond that, just taking into consideration, I think part of it too that you just have to acknowledge was Bowling Green. While they were resilient on Friday, they were a lot more kind of looking at it just on paper. Not that better team, if you will. They were really kind of trying to like build up, if you will. They were really trying to fall behind Notre Dame. And I mean, credit though to Higgins getting his first collegiate goal. That was the highlight of the night, absolutely too. And really, what was learned is Bowling Green needs to test Kempf as much as they can down low. You're not going to get those fancy shots from up high like you will. The only one the entire weekend that came from really outside of the crease was from Higgins when he was able to get that one. So you had to test Kempf, and I think that was something you learned on that Friday game. But in Saturday, you did your best you could. I mean, Kempf just this entire weekend played out of his mind. He has a .960 save percentage, which is one of the 4 points that I have for Bowling Green over this entire weekend is Kempf just had a phenomenal game, and you're going to get that. I mean,
yeah, I mean, you compare it too. I mean, that's not even to say, Ben and I said this on the broadcast as you heard Friday. Cole Moore and Kempf giving up 3 goals each on Friday did not reflect a bad performance from either of them. I mean, it's not just the volume. They didn't have probably their prettiest save percentages of the year that night, just maybe due to like shot volume. But I mean, the degree of difficulty of some of the saves they were making was, I mean, pretty remarkable. I mean, and to credit, Jacob Steinman played as well, in my opinion, on Saturday as well. Nick Kempf, once again, I mean, he brought that same level. I mean, truly, I believe you said this on the broadcast kind of like towards the closing, but I mean, I think goaltending was absolutely the biggest story of this weekend. A big credit to Nicholas Kempf, a tough Big Ten for sure, a lot of finesse, forwards especially in that conference, maybe less of the physicality of the CCHA, as I'm sure Nathan would love to get on his soapbox about. But I digress. A really, really impressive goaltending showing from all 3 goaltenders who, partook in this weekend. And I think, even where the teams may have things they want to improve on the ice, certainly, I don't think anybody walks out feeling anything but good about their goaltending, for sure.
I will say Kemp, 48 saves. That's a career high for him for his Saturday night performance. Also, fun fact, mentioned him getting the shootout victory in 8 rounds. That's not the first time in his college career he's won a shootout in 8 rounds, as apparently last year there was a outdoor game between Notre Dame and Penn State at Wrigley Field, and he helps them beat Penn State in 8 rounds in a shootout.
Wow. I mean, what a stage there, right? Wrigley Field outside hockey, which that reminds me of something that we're going to circle back on close to the end of this weekend's discussion. So keep that on the back burner in your head. But, I mean, yeah, great goaltending there. I think something the Falcons should definitely be happy about. A couple more things in terms of, points scored, goals on the ice, etc. I think the Falcons, I was just talking to Nick Winholtz before I came in here about this. I think the Falcons are in a good spot because it feels like any of the guys can be the ones to score. And, maybe there's some weaknesses that, maybe you'd rather have like a guy that you kind of, try to force feed a little bit, one has a particular knack for scoring. But, I mean, it feels like they kind of all do. Noah Morneau's first game back since, I want to say, the Ferris State series on Friday night. You can correct me on that if I'm wrong about which series it was. But he comes back, has his first goal back in his first game back, and then the only make for either team in the overtime shootout, giving Bowling Green the win. I mean, that's big time from Morneau coming back. You look at Ty Higgins getting the first of his career. And then on Saturday, definitely not the names you call the most times for the goals. Jeremy Minville and Braden Crampton are the 2 scorers in regulation. I mean, you're getting those scoring contributions from, literally everywhere. Quinn Emerson currently tied for 3rd, I believe, or 4th in the CCHA in points. And, he had 3. He touched all 3 goals on Friday night. You're getting contributions all across the board, and I think that's a huge, huge strength for this team.
I mean, exactly. And you look, too, you mentioned Quinn Emerson, 8 goals so far this season and everything he does, but part of what I noticed, and I noticed this with 3 defensemen in particular, one of them ended up getting on the score sheet. The other 2 just were phenomenal as kind of behind-the-scenes players. But you mentioned Braden Crampton. 3 goals so far this season. He gets one of them last night. You look at, too, just the way he was able to pinch, the way he's able to get back, just that fluid motion of the defense is something that I don't think you should overlook at all. I mean, you look at how he's able to go in, and it really provides that extra attacker for Bowling Green, and you needed that on the power play, which is Bowling Green's power play, something we can get into later on the Saturday night performance. But you look at guys like him, and then the other two, and Jackson Niedermeyer and Ty Higgins. Higgins especially was just moving on that left side, really pinching in, trying to get past Kempf, really just find his sweet spot. And while it wasn't able to be found yesterday as much as he had have hoped, he did find it Friday, which is a good thing you should mention. And nonetheless, it was really just Kempf overall that kept Notre Dame, in that game overall, and really just the deciding factor. Because if you have anybody other than Kempf, that's a completely different game for Bowling Green, and I think you know that if you're Notre Dame.
Yeah, I think you're pretty dead on about that. I mean, I don't think there's a lot of goaltenders out there that are going to put up such a consistent performance. And I think that kind of maybe to your credit, I think it was Nathan that said, Coach Willie wasn't in a particularly bad mood after the Saturday shootout loss. The important thing to remember, number one, you're taking them to ties. The shootout win, obviously the Bowling Green faithful are going to celebrate, shootout win, take that on Friday, and they're going to be a little more downtrodden Saturday. But a tie's a tie. You tied twice with a strong program that plays in the Big Ten, has a lot of resources. That's nothing to come out of the weekend upset with, provided that the level of play was good. Coach Willie always says, it's about, playing to our standard more than it is, specifically this result or that result. And I mean, I think through the two games overall, the standard was pretty well met for the weekend.
Yeah.
I'd agree so too. The standard was definitely the standard, as Nathan and I have heard multiple times outside of the sport of hockey. But either way, I mean, you got to just look more in depth as to what was going on for Bowling Green. And they played to their standard, and I mean, shots on goal, you get 58, you attempt 87. That's something you really like to see. I mean, and then you take it to the face-off too. That was really what was the most even this entire weekend, was the beginning of the draw. And if you look at Bowling Green, when they tend to win more in the face-off, they tend to win more as a team through the whole game. But I think just the big weight on their shoulders for the Orange and Brown this weekend, it was the power play, and especially Saturday. You can't go 1 for 7 on the power play. You can't go and do that and expect to win. Because especially, too, Notre Dame was getting into their own trouble. Cole Brown was getting discipline issues, kind of looking like Sternberg on a couple times. But either way, when you go 1-7 on the power play, that's just was your biggest flaw the entire weekend. You see that especially, too, on Saturday. It's my main point here being you played to your standard on everything except the special team on the power play, but your penalty kill did make up for it.
Yeah, I mean, as I recall, the Falcons had 5-on-3 on Saturday, and that was not where they came out with the goal.
Correct.
But yeah, I think that's a big issue still for them is, you're going to give up penalties too. Both teams are going to give up penalties at some point in every game, sans the Friday against Lake Superior State. That was a crazy one. That was an outlier. There's going to be penalties both ways. You got to capitalize on those opportunities because not knowing any names, but I mean, that you're going to give up some power plays too, and you're going to have to try to get the penalty kill. And I think Bowling Green's penalty kill has been quite good. Definitely a strength for them. But you got to be more productive on your own man advantages when you get them, man. I don't know. That was the one thing that I kind of came out of yesterday's game feeling like not super, enthused about. I was like, it could have been better, I mean, it really could have. And I think, those margins are going to matter when you're playing against the best teams in the CCHA a heck of a lot more than, in this weekend against Notre Dame, where maybe their goaltender is, the biggest reason that you're tying both nights.
Yeah. I mean, you look at the penalty kill especially. It was a lot more, I'll say it's a lot more disciplined Saturday than it was Friday. But I think part of that, too, is just the officiating was a lot more relaxed and a lot more kind of just letting them play it out. They didn't call things unless their hand was really forced. I mean, Bowling Green only had 3 penalties on Saturday, all but one were killed. So, I mean, you look at that and just limiting those opportunities, and definitely there's outliers for Bowling Green on the penalty kill, and I think we all know what's going on with that. But, I mean, especially just the penalty kill and knowing that it's kind of the style that Bowling Green's going to play is physical, and inevitably, whether you're too physical or what's ever going on, you're going to end up in the penalty box for it. So I think part of that is just the brand of hockey Coach Willie wants to play, and it's just some of it's going to be inevitable, but there's also those opportunities that you can shorten so you don't have to go on to being down to only 4.
Yeah.
And something I've noticed is it feels like all season the penalty kill is always consistently good, consistently around like between 80 and 85%. Obviously, it fluctuates throughout the season depending on series. The power play, though, it fluctuates just like the penalty kill, but like one weekend we're ranked in like the top 15 in the nation. Next weekend we're down to 30 in the nation. Like we'll go on a streak where we'll score like one every 20, or the Falcons will score it once every 25% of their power plays, and the next second you check and they haven't scored. They went, technically with the 5-minute majors that can count as 2, they went 1 for 9 on the power play on Saturday. That's not good enough if you want to go far into the playoffs. So
Yeah, it's like 12.5% basically, actually slightly worse. So I mean,
it feels like every time I check the stats, I'm like, oh, Bowling Green's power play is actually looking really good now. It's when like the next game they just completely drop the ball. It's like
the old
go
jinx
0 for
from
5.
looking up the stat, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think there's a lot to look at here. I mean, this next weekend here, back at the Slater Family Ice Arena, first time, back to back, going from one weekend into playing the next one at home also. When you played at home in the Ohio State series, then you went out to Ferris State. Northern Michigan, led to a break before the National Development Team game, but you get to stay home for the week, which I think is nice for this team because you've got the current CCHA leader, St. Thomas. It's interesting as we'll pivot over and look at the CCHA standings and contextualize Bowling Green in it. Bowling Green is the only team now that is at 18 conference games played. Everybody else has played 20. So, that leaves you a lot of... I mean, they've got the most room to move, because of those play games, or at least the most room to move up. It's very much still a control your own destiny, win and in type situation. Not that anybody's at risk of losing out to, the worst of Northern Michigan or Ferris State. Obviously, those top 7 teams are pretty comfortable for the most part. But even so, Bowling Green currently in 5th. They've got 36 points. St. Thomas is in 1st with 45. Augustana, 41 in 2nd. Michigan Tech, 1 point behind, 40. They're in 3rd. Minnesota State, 37. Bowling Green in 5th, 36. Bemidji State, 28 in 6th. The drop-off is generally after that, although Lake Superior State's only 8 points behind Bemidji. And those top 4 teams, St. Thomas, Augustana, Michigan Tech, Minnesota State, guess who you're finishing the schedule with? You're going to be at you're going to host St. Thomas, you're going to be at Augustana, you're going to host Minnesota State, and you're going to be at Michigan Tech, and then it's time for the Mason Cup playoffs. I think Bowling Green's not in a bad spot here, but I think to move up and get favorable seating in any regard, you can't do worse than split any series from here on out, I don't think, because those teams are still ahead of you. I mean, I know there's more points to be earned for Bowling Green than anybody else, but I don't know. I mean, how you feeling about like seeding for them right now?
Well, I suppose we're just going to have to start it off. This St. Thomas series is going to be kind of a deciding factor on how you're going to want to go into the future, but also too, if you look a little more in depth, Bowling Green has the same number of conference losses at St. Thomas, and part of that is just they have to catch up. They still have taken a non-conference series this weekend, and then but what a weekend it was for the CCHA, especially Friday. I mean, Bowling Green in the non-conference, but Northern Michigan gets that upset win against Bemidji State, and then you see what happened Saturday, just for kind of a one-day thing, but either way, this CCHA, there's a lot of unknowns right now, and it's not crazy to say, especially if Bowling Green splits this weekend series with St. Thomas and then it goes their way for the rest of the season, that you could very well see a Bowling Green team in the 2nd, 3rd, maybe even 1st spot of the CCHA, which if you're able to get the 1st or 2nd, you're guaranteed. You got to play the game, obviously, and you got to win, but you're guaranteed to be at the Madhouse on Mercer for as long as possible.
And I don't think there's a team that stands to benefit. For my money, there's not a team that stands to benefit more from that home ice than Bowling Green. I mean, just like the noise, the crowd environment is,
I'd lay money on that, yeah.
Pretty second to none, in my opinion.
Especially during the second round or the final, because I know usually the first round of playoffs kind of lines up with Bowling Green's winter break. Spring break, so it doesn't always give the biggest home ice advantage just because students are still usually at their homes. But this arena, when it's full, it's one of the best and the loudest you've ever seen. And even when it's not at full capacity like it was Friday, the community, even when students for the Ohio State game, that was during winter break, it was still filled. So this community loves hockey. The student base loves hockey. Everyone in this area seems to love hockey. So if you can play your first couple of games, even if you don't necessarily play the final here, if you can play the first 2 rounds here, it's going to look really good for the Falcons.
Yeah, I mean, I every series, it sounds silly and cliche to say, but I mean, every series from here on out is the most important series of the season. Oh, yeah. You know, to be honest, any of those give you the chance to get some leverage in the seeding. And obviously, you know, there's a couple of series that have to happen between some of those 4 top teams as well. So, you know, there's a chance for, you know, one of them to run ahead. You know, if Minnesota State really goes on a tear against the remaining top 4 teams that they have to play, you know, might work to your advantage, because then all you have to do is kind of, you know, take care of them and they're the next closest to you. You know, the field could stay more even. I mean, you know, there's a lot of room for variance, I guess is the point. Everyone as important as the last one. Back to the Falcons, though, stepping away from the CCHA standings a little bit. Brett Foe, we have been made aware via an Instagram post the suspected injury, or, you know, unofficially, you know, not confirmed by Coach Williams, but I mean reposted by Brett Foe and, you know, several teammates, including Jackson Niedermeyer, suggesting both broken ribs and a punctured lung. That being the case, which I don't know why they would put that out there if that's not the case. That's the season for him, realistically. I mean, you're not gonna return on a timetable for any of the remainder of the season. There's not much season left. Dan, I mean, Nathan, you know, you were both at the venue. I mean, you kind of called, I think, you know, I had the broadcast up at the venue also. Yeah. You know, you called pretty easily, like, yeah, that doesn't look good. You know, talking about the padding and stuff. I mean, what'd you see, you know, from your perspective?
Yeah, and I mean, before we get into it, just, I mean, prayers are with Foe, his teammates, his family, all that. We're hoping he has a hopefully painless, speedy recovery. Just, he's going to be okay, hopefully, as that's what's most important, is his health. But absolutely. I mean, let's dive into it. He gets hit, we're right on the side. And if you've taken any physics class, an object in motion stays in motion till it finds sudden impact, which was the post. Those things are solid metal and are very, very heavy. You get that right to there, it's just, with no padding too, he basically took that full impact right on his skin, which is something you don't want to do, obviously. And then you lead it, just, you're hoping that he's okay from that. But really, it's a dangerous sport at times, and that's what makes it so, you know, intimidating. You're playing with knives on your feet, trying to get, you know, a piece of frozen rubber into a net, and it just, but then it, I think, raises a question. What is going on with the NCAA right now? Because part of this, too, you got to consider, this goes into the record book, both games, as a tie. If you're playing hot, and Coach Williams briefly mentioned it yesterday in his press conference, if you're just playing, there has to be a meaning to it. So if you're going to play and no matter the result, it's just going to be a tie. Because if, correct me if I'm wrong, if either team would have scored in that overtime, it'd still go down as that third game. There wouldn't be a win or loss in regulation because you had to play. So to see a player get played in what could be considered garbage time and to get hurt to that nature, I think needs to raise some eyebrows, not only at Bowling Green and the CCHA, but at the NCAA level. If you're going to have someone get hurt like that, you really need to change the rules and maybe go to something similar like the NHL, where you have the overtime losses and everything like that.
Well, and that's an interesting point, too, because it's like, you know, if you're the governing body, is that the kind of decision that you're making, knowing, I mean, you know, it could have happened in a 0-0 game on the ice. I mean, it could have happened last week against Lake Superior State. You know, the fact that it happened against Notre Dame, you know, that's why we're talking about this. But I'm interested. I don't know that I have a full, that I've fully thought out my opinion on that. But yeah, it does feel like there's kind of a point of diminishing returns with how the overtime results go in the books. And to be honest, Dan, it also raises the question, and I've talked about this with basketball, with football at least has the benefit that in the football season you play your non-conference opponents at the start of the year.
Right.
Coach Williams, in a very, I think, appropriate mindset for a head coach, said that, basically, our opponents are faceless. We go into each series, trying to control us and, be the best version of us, essentially. And that's fine. But, I mean, programs aren't built, seasons aren't remembered just by how you did against, Big Ten opponent that you sometimes see or that used to be in the conference with you. And that's not a shot at, the team for scheduling them. It's not a shot at CCHA. It's certainly not a shot at Coach Williams. You know what I mean? I think these are great games to, sharpen the team, get experience against, teams that kind of have a different play style. I mean, the Big Ten and CCHA are not the same kind of hockey, and that's, absolutely true. I mean, again, Nathan will be happy to tell you. But that in mind, it's, to me, when you're this deep in the season, at the start of the season, everyone's kind of an unknown. It's hard to point fingers or anything. When you're this deep into the season, you kind of know who's who to an extent. I mean, I would say, and I'm sure you would agree, the top 6 teams of the CCHA are arguably head and shoulders above the other 3. You can maybe make an argument against Bemidji State being kind of closer to the median than the top or the bottom. They've had a bit of a fall off of late. But regardless, you can approximately tier the CCHA, and I think about like 90% of college hockey fans would be able to agree on, where those lines are drawn. And so, late in the season, that's when it feels like it matters, If it was the start of the season, it's like, we don't even know what Bowling Green was going to be, and, they don't develop their identity with, foe or another player on the ice. They're not used to having them, fine. But, you get these teams that, develop identity. Late in the season, those injuries, you feel the weight of them so much more. And, scheduling different doesn't necessarily prevent those, but it does feel like there needs to be kind of more value, reason, or meaning behind, the scenes of those overtime games to justify what are we still playing for? No team's going to tell their guys, we're not playing the overtime. We're actually forfeiting now that we tied in regulation. Nobody in their right mind's going to do that. They'd get walked out of town in a heartbeat if they did, probably. But yeah. It does raise a question of, why are we devaluing? Because you're right. I mean, if it's in a CCHA game, it's like there's already less stakes off the table because you took a point from regulation. And, how worth it is it for one extra point? And is that something that falls on the CCHA? Is that something that, coaching staffs need to manage? Like, hey, we're going to, I guess you're going to keep rotating guys either way. I don't know, to be honest. But that you do raise a compelling question.
I would say, going back to the injury, it's horrible for the Falcons because, again, it's horrible because if that is true for Foe, that his season's probably done, which is heartbreaking to see a senior in his last season go down and have a season-ending, probably at this point, probably a college career-ending injury like that in his final month or so of the regular season. Especially it hurts for the Falcons because they just got Morneau back. They just got Zlunka back from injury. Norris is still out with a injury. He does seem to be getting better. I saw him walking around without crutches at the game, watching his teammates. So good to see him hopefully making some recovery there. But I personally like seeing them go up against a Big Ten opponent at this time of the season. Because I feel like this is the part of the season where where teams are at their best. You're trying to get to the point where your teams, you're not just building anymore. They're not just getting better. It's win now mode. And let's be honest, at the end of the day, the goal as a hockey team is to win a national championship.
Yeah. And
BG's in a spot where, depending on how their season goes, they're in a spot in the MPI where they could get a bid regardless if they win the CCHA. And in my opinion, if you're going to get one of those bids, you need to prove yourself, not just in the CCHA. Because if we look through the last couple of years of champions, we're going to see Minnesota State made it a couple of years ago in 2022. But other than that, it's NCHC versus Hockey East. It's NCHC versus Hockey East. It's NCHC versus Big Ten. It's NCHC versus ECAC. We see those other conferences. We don't really see the CCHA in there a lot. So in the voters' eyes, if the CCHA is only producing one bid to the tournament every year, and if they're only going so far in the tournament every year, why does beating a CCH opponent matter in the rankings, like in the voting?
Right.
So if you go out and say, hey, we're second or third right now in the CCHA, after, like, let's say in a couple weeks after they've maybe, depending on how they played, they might be like second or third in the CCHA. Hey, we're second or third in the CCHA, and we beat Ohio State at home, and we beat Notre Dame in a shootout, even though it's going to be ranked. And we
split the weekend with
we split the weekend with Notre Dame, and we swept Princeton a couple months ago. It just adds more meaning to your wins.
That's a good point, because to your credit, I think a lot of the narrative, and for me too, trying to follow this team, has been, in making your CCHA tournament run. I know the town has expectations, they want to see a national championship again. You look at a program like Western Michigan, obviously different conference, but you look at a program like that, and I mean, there's a reasonable belief, like Bowling Green can back to the top two. Absolutely. You know what I mean? It's not just your power programs that are the kind of hockey dynasties. You're not looking at here's Denver, and here's your top Big Ten teams, your Michigans and Michigan States and whoever. I mean, it really, I think college hockey is by far the most wide open championship in D1 sports.
I would 100% agree with that. And I mean, if you look at the history books too, the year before Bowling Green did get their national championship, they didn't even make the tournament. Coach York saying they were denied a shot of their tournament appearance, and then you look a little bit closer.
And they took that personally.
They did.
To quote the second greatest basketball player of all time, but either way,
I didn't know LeBron said that.
Oh.
Anyway,
all right.
Shelf it.
As I was saying, and then you look, and then we're gonna and then obviously next season, Bowling Green defeats Minnesota Duluth, quadruple overtime, Gino Cavallini. We have a banner up at the Madhouse in Mercer. So anyways, we're going to fast forward, and you look at the last time, Bowling Green, and I'm a little foggy on my memory here, but Bowling Green for the eventual national champions, the only team who held them to a lead, the only team who forced them to overtime, and you look at that too, so the rest of their games ended in regulation. The rest of their games that nobody ever led. So Bowling Green had a really strong test with Bergeron and his guys. And on paper, Bowling Green could have won that game if it weren't for a particular play from Brandon Cruz. But, I mean, that's just in the past. So now you got to look at the future. But you don't want to repeat the past, if that makes sense. Those who are bound to know history and all that, repeat it. And either way, just look at the things that have gone. And I think you got to take that with you. And also, too, realize that not every little thing has to be instant. You got to consider, too, this is only Coach Willie's second season.
Yeah.
And we're having this momentum. I mean, Bergeron was a great coach, and it took him time. Eigner had his good moments. It took him time. So just realize, too, that you're laying the foundation down right now, that you don't have to have everything instant. Now, if we're still having the same conversation of like could have or possibly in 5 years, maybe it's time to look back at it again. But realize, too, that there's a time for patience, and realize that the foundation is being built, and it's being built, I'd say, very well right now by Coach Williams.
Yeah, I mean, they call it, they say brick by boring brick, but the bricks are being laid a lot faster than most, it feels like, with the momentum that this team has. So you're absolutely right. And I think, like, the framework for me for success, because, at Bowling Green, there's few sports where you can really look at national title as a realistic goal. I mean, I know group of 5 teams will have the ability, or group of 6 now, I always forget that. But like they have the ability to make the college football playoff. But I mean, I think the gridiron is where you see the recruiting and resource mismatch, I think, is the most flagrantly exposed on the gridiron. And so, I think in a lot of ways for a mid-major team, you focus more on winning your conference, maybe getting a bid, and then think about winning a game in your tournament. You're not thinking as much about the national title. Hockey's totally different. A team that's been there before can absolutely do it again. And that's something I didn't really think about. That's a really good point to both of your credit. The Ohio State Notre Dame series, especially this late in the season, when it's not like early, you can't say fluke this, that, or the other. I mean, those start to build a case as, what this team is from a national standpoint, and not just like, how well can they contend in the CCHA? Because you're right, there's not, as good of a conference, as competitive as the teams in the CCHA are, there's not that, pedigree and brand that's going to carry you into, getting in over, one of those, teams from, one of those other strong conferences like you mentioned, Nathan. So that's a really, really good point. I do, there's definitely a novelty to the, not a novelty, but, a strong argument for why those mid-season out-of-conference matter. Plus, I think it's kind of a heat check for the coaching staff. You're going to get a different style of hockey, depending on the conference you play in. I mean, there's just trends. I mean, that's just true. CCHA is very, very physical, and Bowling Green's used to playing against that. You played against some kind of different hockey from Notre Dame and Ohio State. And, I think that's only a good thing for, especially your defense, but just in general. I mean, to face a wider variety of opponents, if you're going to face a team in the CCHA, they're not all just, coming out and smacking you against the boards and, sticking your nose in it. But, there's just different styles per team. And I think the variety of experience, I think, is just only going to be a strength for the team. It just sucks that this is all a conversation that we're having in the wake of, an injury that was unfortunate. But also to circle back, and then I'll pass the mic back to you again. The Dalton Norris, the kind of expectation I was talking with Ben a little bit, seems like we're going to expect him to probably play again this season. And as big of a loss as Brett Foe is, I think an even bigger get back if you can get a healthy Dalton Norris to bolster that defensive core. I mean, you've got, I think great players top to bottom on this roster. But it feels like offensive production is something that has been spread around a lot more on the team. And to me, being an elite defensive player, isn't as easy to come by for this team, which isn't to say that, some of the guys, later on the rotation, second, third line guys are worse defenders. But, a guy like Gustav Sternberg, a guy like Dalton Norris, you felt the lack of Gustav Sternberg after his ejection Friday. I mean, those are big voids. You felt the lack of Dalton Norris back there, just a smart defender who knows where to look, knows how to put himself physically in position. I mean, you need as many of those as you can get. So, I think the potential return for him is enormous for this team.
I mean, Dalton Norris is, in my opinion, probably the most dynamic player on this Falcon hockey team because he's a great leader. He's the captain. He's involved in everything. He's on the power play. He's on the penalty kill. He's great defensively, great offensively. He's just all around a solid player in everything. I don't think he necessarily leads the team in any specific stat or in block shots, but he's in the top 5 on the team on everything. So he's just always out there, always contributing. And also, going back to his leadership, we see him line up with Sternberg a lot. And I think he does a really good job because we talk about how good Sternberg is physically. He also takes a lot of penalties, and he also can lose his temper a lot. I think it's not necessarily a surprise that Norris gets hurt. And then we have Sternberg has gone in the last 3. Do you want to count, because technically Norris got hurt on the second game. He's gotten 3 game misconducts since Norris got injured between this weekend at Notre Dame, last weekend at Bemidji, and then at the end of the Lake Superior game. I think Norris I don't think we really fully understand how well Norris is good. It's like calming down his teammates or firing them up if need be, or for Sternberg calming him down when they need to. So he's just all around a great player on the ice, off the ice, leadership, skill wise. Arguably the most dynamic player on this team. Yeah,
he's just a big mindset guy, and I think, Willie kind of talked about it, not just the player he is on the ice, but, there's a reason that he's the captain. There are other great leaders on the team, but there's, not a guy who encapsulates it all better. And, I would argue, probably about as bad of a loss as you could have had from injury. So, eyeing a potential return for him, probably not this weekend, but, maybe next weekend, the series at Augustana. That could be huge for this team.
If they can just get him back before playoffs, that's could be.
Because you're making the playoffs. We know this, but
they've already clinched playoffs. I'm pretty sure if I did the math right. But so yeah,
you have to. You'd have to get passed by Ferris and Northern Michigan.
Yeah. Honestly,
and you're
though,
25 ahead of Northern Michigan. Yeah, no, there's not. They don't have enough games left
for Norris. Keeping that in mind, I would not want him to rush back.
No,
I know he wants to because it is his senior season, so he wants to spend as much time on the ice as possible. I don't want him. If I'm Willie, or if I'm a fan, or if I'm like anyone in that locker room, I would not want him rushing back early, re-injuring himself. I want him to take the full time to get fully healthy. As long as you're back by playoffs, we'll be fine. Like we'll be fine in that room.
Yeah,
that should be what like the coaches are telling him, the doctors, his teammates. Like, do not rush back. We will be okay without you, but we do want you back by playoffs. So please get healthy.
Yeah, and I'm sure they know that too. I'm sure that Dalton knows that himself. It'll be interesting to see how they kind of elect to manage that. You know, if a regular season return to push for seeding is something they eye, or if it's really just, hey, we're not going to push him back. Because at the same time, like, you'd probably like to get him in the fray before having to come back cold in the playoffs. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Especially if there's a chance that you finish outside of the top 4, which, I mean, right now there is. I wouldn't want to go on the road and get, first game under my skates against Minnesota State or Michigan Tech or Augustana or St. Thomas.
Exactly.
On the road. First time in, I guess it would be like 2 months by that point. I mean,
exactly, yeah.
So there's a difficult line, I think, for them to walk there. You want him back in the fray desperately, I think, but at the same time, you can't rush it. So I'm curious to see how that plays out when we see him back in action.
There's a lot of, possibilities and chances, but while Bowling Green sits in that 5th position, it is unlikely that they will finish outside of the top 4. Realistically, if you're not able to get that first spot, maybe you're going for a 3rd or 4th, kind of just one of the outsiders looking in. But something with the CCHA that's just so weird is there's kind of 2 groups almost, and then there's just Bemidji. And when I say that, I mean kind of, you look at the top 5 teams right now: Bowling Green, Minnesota State, Michigan Tech, Augustana, St. Thomas. All are fighting for what could be a home playoff ticket and wanting to have their fans. And from a non-biased perspective, I will say that Bowling Green has the best home advantage in all of the CCHA. And then there's teams like Lake Superior, Northern Michigan, and Ferris State who are in a rebuild right now and trying to kind of get back to that. And then there's just Bemidji that's kind of caught up in the middle of these two. But as going back to Norris and with him right now, definitely, unless you put yourself in a position where you have to fight for that home playoff ticket, I will say you need to just kind of take it easy and go back to the basics, the fundamentals, not putting yourself in a situation, as you said, where you have to go up to Houghton, you have to go play Minnesota State, Augustana. Looking at the schedule, I would say test the waters potentially on the Minnesota State weekend. You have your home crowd, and all these teams, I'm not saying any of these teams are bad. They're where they are in the standings for a reason, but it's kind of like, what poison are you going to take? And I would say the safest option is Minnesota State at home instead of a St. Thomas or Augustana. And then I think Michigan Tech, too, is just too close because, God forbid, you re-injure yourself in the Michigan Tech series. You don't have enough time, really, to come back to that before the quarterfinals for the Mason Cup.
Yeah, absolutely right, Nathan. Anything on that?
If that's truly where he makes a comeback, announcing, especially because I would assume that he'd be a starter that first night back, announcing to the hometown fans that your captain is back from injury would probably be the biggest cheer. Probably the biggest cheers we've heard all season in that Slater Family Ice Arena. And it doesn't even matter if it'd be a sellout crowd or not. It'd be a deafening.
Yeah, I don't think you could get them much more fired up than that. It'll just be one to monitor, though. Can't say we have the answers now, but definitely the hope for this team to get him back, because it'll put them in a much better position. Do you have anything else on St. Thomas? Because other than that, we spent 50 minutes on hockey, which I know. Love doing it for the boys. Anything else that you think is really relevant about this team since since this weekend or last 2 weeks. We didn't talk about them after Bemidji either. Sweep of Bemidji was well needed, but I also think indicative of kind of the fall off of a team that I think was very middle of the pack and maybe thought to be like a bit better than recent years. A team that's had Bowling Green's number too. I mean, certainly a demon you've exercised a little bit if you're Bowling Green, finally getting that win in Bemidji. But I mean, I think the rest is just waiting on the ice for the next 4 weeks, and there's a lot of exciting hockey left, and then playoffs, and it'll be a question of if we get to see that here in Bowling Green or if Bowling Green has to go on the road. But I think that kind of does it for them. The next action for the Falcons will be this upcoming Friday and Saturday when the St. Thomas Tommies, which is such a fun mascot name, the St. Thomas Tommies, but they'll come to town at the Slater Family Ice Arena February 6th and February 7th. I believe Ben and Nathan are on the call one of those nights, and Ben and Vaughn on the other one. I could be mistaken on that, though. You would probably remember if you're on the call.
It's Ben and Kevin.
Ben and Kevin.
Then
and
Ben
then
and
Saturday
Vaughn.
is Ben and Vaughn Ullum. So Kevin Hutchinson with Ben Korak on Friday, Vaughn Ullum, and Ben on Saturday. Fridays will be a 7:07 puck drop, 6:07 puck drop for the Saturday one on February 7th, the day before the Super Bowl, day before our next show as well. Was that a little facepalm?
Yeah, when you said 6-7.
I said 6:07.
Yeah, and Dan Reinauer took the opportunity to do that,
onions.
and
Well,
disappointing, truly.
Thanks for throwing me under the bus
You know what?
there, Nathan.
Of course, I'm going to throw you under the bus.
I've been
The camera
Did
doesn't
a video.
but
I've been very honored for the past 50 minutes to talk about the greatest sport in the world, though.
maybe that's on me. I should have been paying more attention to not saying that. I know.
Gotta remember who's in the room.
Yeah. Some freshman activities, but that's all right. As we finish out the hour here, I want to throw one. I told you to put this on the back burner when we talked about the game at Wrigley.
Yeah.
Is there a cooler sports environment than outdoor hockey? I'll full disclosure, until I joined Falcon Media Sports Network, I didn't really watch hockey that much. My household didn't really watch it. I was aware of the teams. I was aware of Bowling Green's history, and I've even come to games over the years at Bowling Green, but never like a hockey fan more than just like, oh yeah, it's a sport and that's what we're going to because I'm a sports guy. Now I'm a full psychopath at this point. I love it.
Yeah.
But I wasn't that aware, not unaware, I shouldn't say, but I certainly didn't have the appreciation that I do now. And I mean, like the stadium series, they've done it at the Shoe and at the Big House, Beaver Stadium, Wrigley Field, as you mentioned. I mean,
Just this weekend, Beaver Stadium for a college hockey game.
I think it was Penn State and Michigan State in Beaver
Correct.
Stadium.
That was...
And I mean, what a setting. They have like 70,000 because it's, the stadium can just hold like 115,000.
Correct.
I mean,
exactly.
that's crazy. That kind of turnout for hockey games, like college hockey, is awesome. I mean,
exactly. And I mean, part of that too is just Penn State is so loyal for their team in Happy Valley and everything like that. And I mean, Bowling Green has played outdoor hockey before up in Toledo at Fifth Third Field. It's happened twice that I know of. There, Bowling Green only played in the 2014-2015 season when that all went down, or maybe it was 13-14. Long time ago is my point. Seeing college hockey outdoors would be phenomenal. I mean, if you look at the professional level, I've only gotten one outdoor game. Nathan's had way too many, but I mean, beyond that, I mean,
but by that he means my team, the Penguins, not me. I've never been to one.
But
I want to though.
The stadium series in Columbus, I mean, at with school, but I mean, it's phenomenal. Just the atmosphere, the environment. I mean, great performances all around. After the first period, that was a phenomenal concert. But beyond that, I mean, let's take it back to outdoor hockey. It's really just the purest form of the sport, if you think about it. I mean, some of my friends and I, it's been so cold out for the past 3 weeks or so, just going out onto the ice and playing, and you feel like kids again. It's the purest form of falling in love with the just simplicity of the sport before, all this other things get in the way of it that are, while necessary, just kind of take away from
amalgamations of the original form. I mean, yeah, you think of the sport being conceived on frozen lakes or whatever, and it's like, I mean, yeah, it's kind of the it kind of returns to that pure essence feel. My kind of follow up to this, unless you had something you wanted to add.
I do. Again, I agree. It's amazing to watch, and Dan mentioned it's been a long time for BGSU on an outdoor game. So, little challenge for Derek Vandermeer. Can we bring an outdoor game to Detroit? It'd be difficult, but I mean, I think it'd be fun.
Let's get new turf before we get to the Detroit. But beyond that,
just bring it. Just
bring
bring
it.
Doesn't matter.
Slap
bring it on. Doesn't have to be good. It just has to be there.
I mean, too, though, that just brings up an interesting point. Local areas. I mean, Fifth Third, 20 miles from here, even on your own campus, yeah, you have the Detroit as potential locations. And I mean, if you want to travel a little bit, I'm sure there's some up in Michigan, like Detroit. I mean, the Great Lakes Invitational, BG has played there at the Little Caesars Arena there a handful of times. But if Comerica Park has their, just has like a bunch of college teams and wants to do an invitational, let's do an outdoor game there. I mean, I think that's something that the athletic department could be looking at right now. And I mean, it would be awesome to see, even if it's not in my 4 years here, being an alumni, seeing the school you graduated from playing just in the elements.
Yeah, and so that'll kind of bring me to my last question on this point as we're nearing the closing of this hour here. What is your ideal Bowling Green outdoor, we'll say series, play like a couple games? Who's the opponent? What's the venue?
I'm going to say Detroit because I think it'd be really cool to just have it on home campus with the crowd. I'd probably say Ohio State and then like St. Thomas, because those seem to be two teams that BG's had a real rivalry with over the last couple of years. So I feel like those would be very aggressive, very physical games. And I love the physicality of hockey more than anything else. So I want to see some fights. I want to see some big hits. I want to see Gustav Sternberg get mad. At the door.
Great point. For considering local rinks that are outdoor,
you could think bigger picture too. Don't feel like you have to be in the confines of just Bowling Green. But it seems like
Wrigley
you have something
Stadium.
in mind.
Wrigley. I mean, right. Dwight Perry is just an obvious. Goes without saying, on campus, beautiful, just atmosphere, beautiful backdrop of I-75 and Jerome Hill, and then like going into the city, like your first little introduction to BG. I mean, Fremont's rink is basically an outdoor rink at this point, so maybe we'll play there. But I mean, you look to just bigger picture. If you play a Michigan Tech, like let's get some Michigan teams together, let's get some Ohio teams together, and maybe St. Thomas. I mean, they're a tough opponent. You know that's kind of what your yardstick is right now. So I guess bigger picture, let's go to Comerica Park and play Michigan Tech.
I like that. I mean, that's a pretty, reasonable reach for both. I think the ideal neutral sites are the ones that have some kind of middle ground, or they're not, like significant, like the fifth third field game. Fifth third field, easier for me to say. But that third game for Bowling Green and Toledo in baseball, that game only works because Bowling Green's close enough to Toledo,
right? And
that fifth third field's not like right on the campus. You know what I mean? If Bowling Green was 2 hours away from Toledo, I that would feel a lot less like a neutral site. I mean, exactly. It's still in Toledo, but it doesn't feel like a home game for them. And if the fans travel well because they're able to, because it's close. I like that the Tech and Bowling Green, Comerica. I think that's a lot more reachable than, especially if you look at a lot of the other CCHA opponents. I mean, you got a bit of a haul from Bowling Green. Kind of feels in a lot of ways that Bowling Green's kind of the farthest outlier there.
Correct.
You start getting up into Michigan and Minnesota, especially. I mean, Bemidji, Mankato is a pretty long haul from Bowling Green for sure. But I think you're right. I think Comerica. I think those are the two best options as you go for the nearest ballpark, which is Comerica, or I guess Fifth Third technically, but the nearest majors ballpark would be Comerica, or you go for the Detroit. And I kind of my leaning is the Detroit. And the reason is not because it's on campus, because that's fine, home field advantage. Like maybe you'd rather have a neutral site in those situations, but because the bigger the venue, it's still a question of how much turnout you'll get for that. Some people aren't going to want to be outside in the elements. They're wrong. It's awesome.
It is.
But some people aren't going to want to. And with schools like Bowling Green, Michigan Tech, it's not the schools with the giant, it's not a Penn State, it's not an Ohio State sized school, so it's going to be a little harder. I think you're not going to feel the environment as well in a venue like the size of Comerica Park, for example, which is the only reason I'm inclined, if they're playing, University of Michigan or Michigan State or something, that's very close and is also a larger university, then you might pack those seats a little better. I don't have doubt that Bowling Green would travel well for this scenario. But I think for Bowling Green specifically, I think the Doit would be, or, a smaller school type football stadium would be the way to go, just to manage, you imagine if the Slater had the same numbers, but it had double the capacity, the environment wouldn't be as good. You know what I mean? It's just kind of the nature of how, sound works. But I think both of those are very, very good answers to that, and that's great timing because we are at the top of the hour here. We still got a lot to talk about both basketball teams, which were in action this weekend, and maybe a little bit more riffing while we're here because we have the opportunity. So don't go anywhere because you're still here listening to the Zig Zone on WBGU 88.1 FM.
You are listening to Falcon Media Sports Network coverage on WBGU 88.1 FM in Bowling Green, Ohio.
To get your music played on Northwest Ohio's community radio station, submit your materials via snail mail or through Facebook. Additional opportunities include on-air interviews, live performances, and more. Promote your band and your music on Northwest Ohio's community radio station. Submit your materials now and start engaging with a larger audience. Return to Radio Freedom with local music on 88.1 FM WBGU Bowling Green.
Ever heard of Falcon Media Sports Network's broadcast on Falcon Radio or WBGU 88.1 FM but don't know where to listen? Well, set down the radio, pick up your phone, and go to bgfalconmedia.com and scroll to the bottom of the page to stream Falcon Radio and WBGU 88.1 FM for all broadcasts.
Be a part of Black Swamp Players, BG's award-winning community theater group. BSP produces a 5-show season, adds on the winning play from our Playwriters competition, hosts improv and special events, and is totally volunteer-run. You can be part of this inclusive arts community in many ways, on the stage, in the director chair, as an usher, watching from the audience. Come see our Black Box Theater and find out how you can be involved. More at blackswampplayers.org.
You are listening to Falcon Media Sports Network coverage on WBGU 88.1 FM in Bowling Green, Ohio.
Welcome back here to the Zig Zone. We are in the second hour. Once again, you're here on WBGU 88.1 FM or on bgfalconmedia.com if you're listening that way. As always, we appreciate you for tuning in either way. I'm Holden Ruck once again, joined by Dan Reidenauer and Nathan Burkett. Really the hockey special today. If we just had Ben in the studio, I feel like it'd be kind of perfect. But, listen, if you're in athletics and you're listening, start getting on that outdoor series, okay? Bowling Green wants that. We want that. The people want it. Give them what they want. They'll show out.
Derek.
Mr. Vandermeer, sir. This is a call to action.
Mr. Vandermeer, we would like it at the Doit, please.
All jokes aside, we're going to talk a little bit because there are other sports in action too. Only difference is I don't think that the feelings are as optimistic about either of them right now. We're going to start with the men's basketball team first. And tough. I mean, just anywhere you slice it, kind of a tough loss for the men. A loss against Central Michigan, a close one, 59-62 at the McGuirk Arena, in Mount Pleasant. And just for a team that's, fairly well healthy and, Todd Simon now in the third year, a guy that I think a lot of us, in the room and in this organization, are pretty positive on. I believe that Todd Simon is a good coach. This isn't a game that the Falcons should have lost.
Exactly. And you just kind of have to look at it. And Javante Campbell, he gets 4 steals, which is, I guess, kind of his, peanut butter and jelly, what he's known for. But, this is I don't want to be too negative, if you will, but this is kind of just going to leave a poor taste in your mouth, if you will, just going forward. But I don't think it's because also too the thing with basketball is there's flexibility. I mean, Coach Mino has talked about that where there's just a quick turnaround. There's a quick, you have to get back and forth and just you see too. You're going to get Ball State. You're going to get back to the Stroh Center, and even though if your game that you have to end the month of January in Mount Pleasant wasn't very pleasant, you still have Ball State before the Sun Belt Challenge.
Yeah, something that's really sticking out to me about it is, the MAC. I mean, obviously there's Miami, who's now ranked 24. I want to say they're 22-0 overall, a perfect 10-0 in the MAC. Really impressive story so far this year. But when you look at the bottom of the MAC, there's only 2 games separating the bottom, which is currently Western Michigan, and Bowling Green. Bowling Green's 4-6, Western Michigan's 2-7. So they've played a different number of games too. Bowling Green's played 10, Western's only played 9. But you can look at that and think, okay, well, it's not that bad to lose to Central. We know this is a pretty tight conference, and some of the teams may have played, the better ones already. But then, I'm looking at the wins, Central Michigan, Western Michigan, Eastern Michigan, these are teams who have only beaten other, their only wins are over other bottom feeders or Bowling Green. You're losing to a team that hasn't taken a game off of, an Akron or a Kent State, a Toledo or an Ohio, and this on the heels a week removed from losing a Toledo game that, again, I mean, you could have won, a last second, basically, 3, winning it for Toledo. I don't know. I feel like this team has a lot of questions in front of them right now, and, they've got Ball State coming up at home, another, not great opponent in the MAC. Then you got the MAC Sun Belt Challenge, Arkansas State. I think this one, I know we just talked about the out-of-conference postulate. I like the MAC Sun Belt Challenge. I think it's fun getting to see schools you don't necessarily see if you follow the MAC. I don't think this matters nearly as much as scheduling a Big Ten opponent in January for hockey. You know what I mean? The MAC, I mean, barring Miami continuing this run and then losing in the MAC championship, the MAC is not going to be a too-big conference. I couldn't tell you that one of our independent fact checkers, Foster Rosti probably, could probably tell you the last time the MAC had 2 bids to the tournament. If that's happened, I could not tell you that. But that in mind, I mean, you're not worried about the boon to your resume that you get from beating a Sun Belt team. It's more of a morale thing, a momentum thing. And then you're on to NIU, and then you got Toledo again on Valentine's Day. And I mean, you've got some tough sledding creeping up fast, because after Toledo, you play Kent State, you play Miami in a nationally televised game at Millett Hall in Oxford. I mean, you're looking at being in a pretty potentially scary spot. If you don't win against Ball State and NIU, I mean, you've got a decent chance of being as well as last place by the time the Miami game comes around. I'm not saying that the teams below you are going to win that many games, but I mean, you're really kind of calling into question if you're going to make the tournament. You've got Miami, Akron, Kent State, Toledo, Ohio, UMass, Buffalo. Bowling Green's in 8 right now at 4-6. Ball State's in 9 at 3-6. Eastern Michigan and Northern Illinois and Central Michigan are all at 3-7. So they're only one result different. The next game, say Tuesday, the next slate of MAC games, there's a Ball State game for Bowling Green. Say Bowling Green loses. First of all, Ball State jumps them, and they're in tournament position, and Bowling Green's not. You're at 9th. Let alone Eastern Michigan, Northern Illinois, Central Michigan. Any of those win. Central Michigan wins Tuesday, for example. I don't think they play Tuesday, but if they do, if they win their next one and Bowling Green loses their next one, that puts you out of tournament position too. And you're getting to the point of the season here where there's just not that many games left. I read up through the Miami game. You've got Ball State Tuesday. You got the MAC Sun Belt Challenge next Saturday. Following week, you've got Wednesday and Saturday, NIU, Toledo. After that, you've got a Tuesday, Friday. You've got Kent State and Miami. I mean, if you get 1 out of 3 against Toledo, Kent State, Miami, you're probably looking pretty good. I think, Kent State is not as good as they've necessarily always been right now. And you played close with Toledo, so you could get Toledo back on your home turf. I would believe that. But it's not crazy to think you're going to lose 2 out of those 3 games in that stretch. Western Michigan should be a win. But then you've got UMass. That's not a gimme. and then you got to go on the road to EMU. That's not a gimme either. And then the MAC tournament's here. So you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 conference games left. You are already more than halfway through that conference schedule, and you are barely hanging on to a tournament spot. And with a team that hasn't had the injuries that they had last year, I mean, they got to get, credit to Central Michigan. Maybe they came out swinging. They're on a 2-game win streak, the only winning streak of more than one game outside of the top 2. Miami on a 10-game win streak because they haven't lost for conference play. Akron on an 8-game conference win streak. They only have 1 loss in the conference. So maybe Central Michigan's building a little bit of momentum. Maybe they're a little bit better than the record suggests. But, I mean, it's getting kind of dire here if you're the men's team. Looking at the box score, I mean, what do you see? I feel like, you're kind of getting the usual performances. Javante Campbell, 21 points, 4 assists, 2 rebounds, 4 steals. That feels pretty run-of-the-mill. Josiah Shackelford had a nice game, 17 points, 8 rebounds, 2 assists, and a steal. It felt like there wasn't enough scoring outside of those two against Central. I think that's maybe the crux of the issue. I mean, 59-62 held under 60, not what you want to see. I'm trying to find the points by half here. Yeah, Bowling Green went into the half 32-20, leading. You're up by 12. And you, second half, score 27 to Central's 42. I mean, they more than doubled their points in the second half, and you score 5 less and lose by 3. I mean, you can point to efficiency, but, I mean, that wasn't even that bad. Shackelford off the bench was 7 for 15 for his 17 points, which is, again, second on the team. Javante Campbell, not always the most efficient, but, I mean, 8 for 21 is not awful by any means. He had 21. I mean, he's kind of the do-all. But, I mean, where was Meyer Wall? 1 for 8, 0 for 4 from the three-point arc, 3 rebounds. I mean, that's not the kind of contribution you expect to see for him at all. Justin Thomas had meaningful minutes. He had 29 minutes. He missed both of his attempts from the field. He made 2 free throws. He had 4 defensive rebounds and 3 turnovers, a block, some steals. Yeah. But, I mean, you look at 29 minutes. That's more minutes than 2 of the starters. Justin Thomas had more minutes than Meyer Wall or Javon Ruffin. Javante Campbell, Troy Glover, Sam Towns had your biggest minutes, but just not a lot doing there. Sam Towns didn't really do a ton outside of rebounding, to be honest, and he had 4 turnovers and 4 personal fouls. Javon Ruffin had 4 personal fouls. Josiah Shackelford also had 4 personal fouls. I mean, you've got guys who are probably, coming out of the game in key situations because they're in foul trouble and you can't afford to foul out there. I mean, I don't know. Just things are not clicking, and I think a lot of it is just the shooting. The efficiency is really, really not there. I mean, I don't know. Just based on what I just threw at you, how do you see any of that?
I mean, again, going back to just barely holding on. Last year the team got really lucky. Let's be honest, to make that.
Oh, absolutely.
It was pure luck at the end, but you gave them a pass because injuries completely derailed their system, or their system and their season. This year, mostly healthy, and you're going 4-6, and it doesn't seem like they have, outside of Javante, they don't have a consistent scorer who's scoring game in and game out.
And I think consistent is the operative term. I think that's really the problem. Because, I mean, there's been games where Meyer Wall has put up big numbers scoring and, taken some of the load off of Javante Campbell. But, again, that didn't happen. Like I said, you look at the minutes leaders. Javante Campbell, 39 minutes, he's the leading scorer. Fine. Josiah Shackelford had 28 minutes off the bench, 17 points. He had a good game. I mean, you look at Justin Thomas. You play 29 minutes, you go 0 for 2. That's it. I mean, that's rough. Javon Ruffin started. He only played 13 minutes. He goes 0 for 3. Meyer Wall 1 for 8. Even Sam Towns 2 for 5. It's not awful, but I mean, in 34 minutes, I don't know. I mean, maybe they're not feeding other guys that much, but you've only got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You've only got 7 guys playing over 10 minutes. I mean, Aiden Goins played 8 minutes. Mekhi Leach played a minute, took a shot. I mean, that's not, meaningful difference in winning or losing. No disrespect to either of them, but they just didn't have the minutes in the game. So, I don't put it on them either. But just, I mean, the shot selection I think that's something that's been routinely a problem. I think the not short time, but the crunch time situational basketball has not been great. I don't remember if it was Kent State or Akron. Those games were back to back. But one of those games, they were up late, probably should have won. There was another situation where they had a timeout. Both ended up not going their way back to back, and they were both winnable situations against two of the MAC's best 3 or 4 programs. And a trope I think we use a lot is, at the end of the season, if this team doesn't have the outcome that they want to have, the game you're going to look back on is, and then, you insert the, whatever devastating loss that was really tough or whatever. Yeah. You're kind of stacking up a lot of losses that aren't big losses, but it's at some point, if you're a good team, if you're a serious team, you got to win one of these close games. And, I don't expect it to come against Kent State. That's tough. A tough team. I don't expect it to come against Miami. They made it close at the end, but that's a phenomenal basketball team this year. Akron, I don't expect it to come against. That's one of the the blue bloods of the MAC, as it were. I'm not even expecting you to do it against Toledo. I'd like to see it. They did it last year, but you're at Savage Arena. It's your rival. That's going to be a tough game. That's a good program. Should happen against Central Michigan.
That's exactly kind of what I'm thinking right now, but on paper right now, especially you talk about Bowling Green and just the men's basketball department. My grandfather was my age the last time that they even got a bid into the NCAA tournament in 1968. And then you look a little bit more into the year, because I think this isn't just a one-game problem. I think it's just an entire season that's going on with the Orange and Brown right now. Is you play, and I'm not calling them bad opponents to start the year. I'm calling teams that aren't on your level. Lemoyne, Siena Heights. Siena Heights isn't going to be a college next year, and you're playing these teams and you're putting 80 on them. Javonte Campbell is getting. He was what was it? Second in the steals in the country.
He was for a time leading.
Unbelievable. And don't get me wrong, Javonte Campbell is a phenomenal athlete. Not every Bowling Green player had those kinds of numbers against these smaller schools. And I think the highlight win that you've had so far this year is that Kansas State game earlier on, just beating the Wildcats, having to go on the road for that. That's been your, highlight so far the year. But beyond that one game, you're playing teams like William and Mary, you're playing Lemoyne. Bethany College. There was a one point with the men and women's teams earlier this year where the record for most points scored by a BGSU team at the Stroh Center lasted 3 days. But it's partially because, and I don't know who this falls on with scheduling, it's almost like sandbagging, if you will. And I think part of that is, I'm not saying get rid of it entirely. Let's play UNC, let's play Duke, let's play Michigan, and that's going to how we're starting our year. I'm saying find that happy medium of teams, somewhat like mid-major, and I know it's easier said than done, but find those teams that are going to lead a challenge but aren't going to be too intimidating and too just downtrodden where you could get guys injured or your just morale could get low.
Yeah, but I think you're right. I don't think you want to play those teams that are too soft that you're not really... what do you... Dan, I don't know if you ever played basketball, but I tell you what, if you go find a 6th grader at a public park on the basketball court and you go play a pickup game with him, odds are you're probably going to hold your own pretty all right because you were an adult man.
Absolutely. And the thing too.
So, and I'm not saying that's the discrepancy between Bowling Green and a D2 or D3 lower program. But what are you doing playing against VMI 81-48? What are you doing playing? And I know that's in Fort Myers. It's like a tournament setting, so that's a different scenario. But Bethany College 120-65.
If I can build off that, Miami, their coach has talked about extensively how they try to get higher name teams on their schedule, and that those higher end teams chose not to accept the challenge, if you will. But I think that's a total different set of mindsets. Like Miami is going out, and even though they're not getting them on their schedule because they were turned down, they're trying to get those big name teams on their schedule, while Bowling Green is going up against Chicago State, Bethany College, William and Mary, again Lemoyne. Yeah. I will not lie. I'm not the biggest basketball fan in the world. I'm not the most knowledgeable compared to like Foster or Tyler from the Falcon Media Sports Network. Artie is another good one. But I feel like basketball is one of those where you know by looking like who's consistently like a pretty good team and who's consistently like a lower end team. These are teams I didn't know existed before this season. So it's like, who? Like, why are you spending? And in my opinion, like you should have a couple of games in there where it's a tune-up game, if you will. It's a game that you can build some confidence with, but you should not have this many.
And this is a great point. We're going to talk about largely the same when we move to the women's team in a little bit here. But, kind of your marquee win, I would argue you're right, is the Kansas State game. And I'm just going to read this list. I don't want you to look, because I want you to just listen and really soak this in.
Okay.
Newman College, UNC Greensboro, Bellarmine, California, Tulsa, Mississippi State, Mississippi Valley State, Creighton, South Dakota, and ULM. Those are the 10 wins for the year that Kansas State basketball has.
How would you be dissing the University of Louisiana Monroe Warhawks and not calling them a legitimate? I'm kidding. But I mean,
no. Again, you've got programs with resources. You've got Missouri, you've got California, Mississippi State. I mean, Tulsa is a comparable program, I would say, to some of the better mid-major teams. But none of these are they're not beating programs that are like ones that pop out to people, or programs that are sniffing being ranked or competing in their conference tournaments, really, or like better conference tournaments. And I mean, that's your best win. When you look over that, they have one conference win. The win doesn't look that great, to be honest. And take that out of the equation. Suppose that Kansas State game isn't even on this schedule. I mean, what do you look to as the identifier for this team's identity, or how set up for success there? I mean, a 1-point overtime win over UMass where Devontae Campbell had to drop 75 points. Not literally, but you know what I mean? You squeak out a win, against Eastern Michigan, a pretty close one, against, not that great of a team at home. Western Michigan, you take care of business, and those are your MAC wins. I mean, not that Kansas State being off the schedule in this hypothetical is removing a MAC win. I mean, I like the win over Ohio at the Convocation Center. I think that's a great win.
Absolutely.
But I mean, that's kind of your only good one.
It's
really?
like to put this.
Eastern Michigan's fine. They put pretty good hurt on Western Michigan, which they should. Western Michigan currently the worst team in the MAC. I mean, I feel like I'm gonna sound like a broken record. We have this conversation. I think that there's plenty of potential with both Coach Fred Schmiel for the women and Coach Todd Simon for the men. Both of them continue to struggle against these, better teams. I mean, we have yet to see a signature win against a marquee opponent for either of them outside of maybe like a Toledo win here and there.
I think that it's part of that is because, again, it's not necessarily that you're playing some of these lower end teams. It's just the volume of games where you're playing lower end teams as like a tune-up or to build up confidence. And when you go up against a MAC team or a higher end team, you're not used to that competition. Like, to put this in like context for like a football, which I know since we're in the MAC, we usually go up and play. We get paid usually, or like BG gets paid to go and play like an SEC team. But that'd be like if Eddie George scheduled all 4 of his non-conference games against Division II and FCS schools. Yeah, like he's like, if Eddie George announces we're only going to be playing Ferris State, Lafayette, trying to think of another, Fordham, and then we're gonna, for our big game, we're gonna go up against South Dakota State, which is a really good team, but still.
That's D2 national champion Ferris State. So let's not talk down on the Bulldogs now.
Exactly, but you get my point.
Yes.
I'd be like if Coach Williams announced that we're going to be playing for our non-conference games. We're going to be taking on the BG club team, the Iowa University club team, and the Oregon Ducks club team. Do those teams have some good teams? Yes, but they're not the same level as a Division I hockey team. Going up against these schools that aren't the same level as you, while it does help to have a game or two against them to help you build confidence, have a tune-up.
Yeah, the tune-up game.
Yeah, tune-up games. Yeah. You cannot build so much of your schedule around them because then you get used to playing them, and then when you go against MAC teams, it feels like you're playing the best when you're not, and you're not used to this level of competition.
Yeah.
And you're right there, and I mean, I'll have you know, Mr. Burkett, Acha hockey is awesome. And part of that too to consider.
Nothing against it. I'm just saying.
Well,
we're not going to. Coach Williams isn't going to schedule club teams or ACHA teams. We should not be scheduling for the basketball team against Division II teams.
And correct. And I mean, BGSU playing Michigan State's club team only lost by a 1. Michigan State having a great year, but I digress. That's just what's going on right now with this team. Is there's a lot of just not finding the right non-conference opponents, and then you get to conference play and you're like, uh-oh, what do we do? Like, you're not almost used to it. I mean, to his point as well with football, yes, we normally start the year out with an FCS team. I mean, Lafayette, Cameron Petaway back-to-back, and I know Fordham is a team BGSU has played a couple years back. I'm blanking on what year. I think it was,
Fordham was last year's opener.
That's what I thought.
Lafayette was this year's opener.
And they keep it to one game, though.
Yeah.
You're not going to see
it's
Lafayette.
It's the tune-up game. And
you're
move on.
You're not getting multiple FCS. You're going. Yeah. You're playing an FCS team to open home opener. The last 2 years, you've had an FCS team to open. You've gone on the road to 2, larger programs, and then you've hosted another, pretty quality mid-major team,
like a Liberty.
Like a Liberty.
Yeah. You have that tune-up game, and then you move on to higher-end talent. You don't keep tuning up.
Yeah,
and that's just the, I guess, state of mind that basketball's in right now for both the men's and women's, and it's going to be interesting to see. And I think part of that too is just the MAC is such just a. There's 2 teams that I see. If there is 2 Mid-American Conference teams to make the March Madness tournament, it's going to be Miami and Akron. Last year when Akron won the MAC and made it, I had them over Arizona, and I was proven wrong. But
I also picked them
over Arizona.
Yeah,
but if in the hypothetical here, if the MAC gets 2 teams to the tournament, it's going to be Miami and Akron. And
I think that any other team already has too many losses as a mid-major that the powers that be aren't gonna, make it an easy path in. If you're looking at, Kent State's the next best team. They have a loss against Akron. They have a loss against Miami, and they also have a loss at Central Michigan.
Wow.
Maybe Central Michigan's actually secretly a really good team. And
maybe this is the conversation we should be having about the sneaky good season the Chippewas are having at 3-7 in conference play.
Does Central Michigan sneak into the March Madness?
You talk about sneaky good in Central Michigan. Just something about that sneaky good aspect that you see of the greatest wide receiver of the 2010s coming from Central Michigan.
Finn Hogan?
Second greatest. I was thinking more Antonio Brown because I put Finn Hogan in more of the 2020s, but Hogan was, just great and viral on social media. The reason that Pudge is so popular. But anyways, just maybe this is Central Michigan's just time to shine. Who knows?
What? Okay.
He started his career at Central Michigan. It's relevant.
Yeah, I guess that's true.
Falcon for life, though. But regardless, getting off base here, I think you're right, Dan. If there's gonna be a second bid in the MAC, it's gonna have to. I think the only way that it can happen is if Miami and Akron both basically win out, and then Akron beats Miami for the championship. Akron's only got 1 loss right now, but I guess they have to play again, don't they? If you look at the Akron schedule, Akron has to play... No, Akron does not have to play Miami again. So if Akron and Miami play again at the MAC championship game for the tournament, and Miami loses, I think that's the best chance of both teams getting in, because Miami's still like, cool, you lost 1 game all year and it was your conference championship. That's probably going to get you into the dance. And
exactly.
Akron being the champion. I don't think...
Was that the championship game last year? Was Akron versus Miami?
Wasn't that... I thought
I thought it was Kent and
I
Akron.
thought it was Kent and Akron.
I could be wrong.
I'm
I
not
just remember Akron and Miami went against each other at some point later in the tournament.
Regardless, Bowling Green just kind of desperately searching for that marquee win. And I'm going to transition. I'm not even going to go like too specific about like the path. I mean, we'll talk about the standings still. We'll talk about, the recent game. I mean, you've got kind of the exact same problem going on for the women's team. I mean, you look at their last game. They play at Toledo on Saturday. Yesterday, I should say. 59-49 result. Held under 50. Not the greatest. Janaea Donahue had 19 points. That was a game high. I mean, I don't think she played bad. She played the whole game, all 40 minutes. 6 for 16 from the field, 7 of 8 of her free throws. Pretty good, 7 rebounds. Did have 5 personal fouls and 6 turnovers. That's going to hurt you a little bit. 2 blocks, 2 steals. Or 2 blocks, 4 steals, 3 assists. So, I mean, really kind of carrying a lot of the weight. Paige Kohler, 4 for 11. 2 out of her 7 three-pointer attempts, both free throws, 3 boards, 2 assists, only 1 turnover, but no blocks, no steals, which I don't necessarily expect, the blocks showing up, obviously. She played 39 minutes. Outside of those 2, which is kind of been the story for this team, kind of a rough performance. Taya Ellis played 17 minutes as a starter, only went 1 for 3, 4 personal fouls, 4 points. Not what you love to see. Lauren Gherkin, who I think has largely been pretty good, maybe even kind of underrated for this team recently, did not have a good showing. She went 2 for 13 from the field. She attempted 11 threes, and her 2 made field goals were 3-pointers. So she finished with 6 points. Didn't attempt any free throws, had 4 rebounds, 3 personal fouls, a turnover, 3 blocks, 3 steals. So, I mean, she, contributed across the stat board, but, I mean, 2 for 13 is not the kind of shooting performance you can have. I question the volume of threes from this team a little bit. I think there's a lot of talent. I don't know that I believe that your shooters are good enough or disciplined enough. One of the two. At least what we've seen recently, I don't think you can have players taking, going 4 for 18 from 3. Like between the 2 of them. I mean, outside of that.
This is a Falcon Media.
That's a little technical error there. Okay, here we go. That was weird. The board started playing a promo. Anyways, you can't have that level of inefficiency. I mean, you're making under 25% of your 3-point total for the game, 5 for 21. Your field goal for the game, 15 out of 55. I mean, you're making a little better than 1 in 4 shots.
Part of that too is just it's not just a singular game against that school up north.
No, it's not.
It's the entirety of just what the MAC has learned when they play the orange and brown. We're going to let them go out. We're not going to let them go in because that's where they get the points, is near the paint and adjacent to that. Let's take them outside. Let them shoot. Let's get the rebound. And that's how they've built their game plan. And, Coach Shamil has been critical, and he has addressed the problem of, the failure to go from the field goal and the failure. I mean, as a team, you make 5 3-pointers the entire game. You're not going to win games that way. And especially, too, you have a second and third quarter that, for the most part, you were able to capitalize on, with UT only getting 8 points per quarter. But it's really the shooting is the Achilles heel. And, Coach Shamil has said that you have to go to the free throw line. I mean, they went 14 to 16 there. But, again, there's a reason the word free is used in that stat. Is yes, they're a physical team. Yes, they know that they hope that their opponent can foul them and they can go to the line and shoot. But that's not always guaranteed. So something has to change here with shooting outside, with that, because really it's just a continual trend that eventually is only going to get worse. And when you start to get later into the year, into the MAC tournament, if you make it and beyond that, it's really just that's where you're going to fall short.
Yeah, and I mean, I think they kind of reflect a similar problem to last year when you had that 3-guard situation with Lexi Fleming, Amy Velasco, and Paige Kohler, all commanding a pretty high amount of minutes. Outside of, Taya Ellis, you don't really have a lot of, inside presence. I would argue you don't have a dominant inside presence at all. Truly, it's not a slight to Ellis, but I don't think they have a player who really takes over on the interior. I think even Erica Porter last year I think had a more significant interior impact there. Finishing out the starters, Taya Ellis just 1 for 3 rebounds, 4 personal fouls. I mean, anytime that you have about as many personal fouls as you do like other stats, rebounds and buckets made is 4, personal fouls is 4. That's not a great game. And the last of the starters, Kaya Woods, she played 33 minutes. That's 4th most on the team. 0 for 7 from the field, 3 out of her 4 free throws. She had a rebound and an assist, a personal foul and a turnover, and a steal. So I mean, if you subtract points for fouls and turnovers and you add them for like other stats, she's like +3 from the field goal or the free throws. Right. Obviously that's not how plus minus works, but I'm just saying using loose math like that, not a great game from her either. And it's it's not a slight to any of them, but I mean they've got to figure it out. And I don't know. To be honest, I don't know if I don't know how much it's on the coaches. I mean, I think there's a level where the players have to play better. I'm not saying the coaches don't need to put them in better situations, and you're never going to hear a coach tell you that, oh, this is on the players. They're not executing. They're not doing. We're telling them everything right, and they're not doing it. But I mean, I think in the locker room they probably know too. This isn't the standard. We've seen them be so much better than this. Paige Kohler had a fine day, 4 for 11, 2 for 7 from 3. 3 boards, 2 assists, as I mentioned. But, I mean, she's had better days. Janaea Donahue's definitely had better days. She had 6 turnovers. But, yeah. I mean, they know that. This isn't a diss to these athletes. I mean, they're really, really good players. But, it's not the standard. It's not the standard of play they've set all year. And, credit to Toledo. This is a good team. Don't get me wrong. This is not the this is not a world beater team by any means. That's not a game that you couldn't have gone into and won. Toledo's 6-3 in the MAC right now. Bowling Green, for the women's side, sitting at 4-6, and in really eerily similar fashion, you're just on the edge of the tournament here. Bowling Green sitting at 8th. Eastern Michigan, same 4-6 record. Western Michigan's only a game back at 3-6. NIU is 2 games back at 2-8. Akron and Buffalo are a fall off for the women's side. But I mean, you're not comfortably in tournament position at all for the Falcons. And I mean, frankly, if they play like they did against Toledo, half the time, the rest of the way, they're going to miss the tournament. I mean, right. You cannot beat a team playing like that. You could not have multiple starters. Like, your third highest scorer had 6. You went 19, 12, 6. You had a player with 4. You had 2 players with 3 and a player with 2. 49 points isn't going to do it. This isn't a team that's strong enough defensively to win by scoring 49 points. I mean, I don't think most teams are strong enough defensively to do that in this game.
You can lead, you can lead a horse, or I guess in this case a falcon, to water, but you can't force them to drink it. I mean, and I think part of that too is, like, you'll see during games, Coach Shamil is, he likes to kind of show his emotions. He's very, he likes to show that side of him. He's not going to be one of those guys who just sits back and just watches, and just doesn't say anything. Like, you'll hear him, like, he'll point out, like, you need to go here instead of going there. Next time, do this. And he likes to be very, vocal and trying to help his team out. So I don't think coaching's the issue here. I think it more relies on just either there's something that's not connecting with what he's saying to the players, or there's just kind of that aspect of it where, like, there's just something missing over all this. What I'm trying to say is, like, he's trying to show the tools, and whether that's, intentional or not of, doing it, maybe you're trying to and you're just not quite getting it right yet. You need that just evolution to learn. But I think part of it too is just the consideration of what's going on and trying to do that. And I mean, your biggest elephant in the room right now is the shooting, especially from 3, has just been, tragic and really needs to be addressed in some way or somehow.
Yeah, I mean, you can't, you can't have starters going 0 for 7. I don't know how I mean, there's so many basketball games in a week across all levels that, it's impossible to quantify this. I don't think you're going to find a lot of teams that do really well when they have starters, shooting that many times and not making one. Again, that's not no disrespect to Woods. We've seen her have phenomenal games where she kind of puts the team on her back, and, she's capable of playing that well. You got to bring that standard. I mean, are you telling me that Toledo just has the absolute clamps? Toledo is a good team. They're 6-3. They're 5th in the MAC right now. They have 11 wins on the year. But 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 other MAC teams have as many or more wins, on the year total outside of conference. So, it's not, you're not playing the best defense of all time here. Defensively good, are they? Yeah, obviously. They held the Falcons under 50. But, I think that falls more on the Falcons than the Rockets. And kind of the last thought I have on them before we preview some upcoming schedule things for Falcon Media, and I'll throw it to you guys if you have any kind of closing thoughts here. Kentucky State, Defiance, Lourdes, Lemoyne. 103-32, Kentucky State. 118-35 against Defiance. 104-76 against Lourdes. And 74-46 against Lemoyne. Not one competitive game at all among those 4. 3 games in a row scoring over 100. 2 games in a row holding your opponent to 35 and under. Defiance only had 35. Kentucky State only had 32. And I'll give the team credit where it's due too. They played some tough games against Wisconsin and Marquette. Both losses, but both respectable losses. 12 points in Madison to Wisconsin. You lose by 16 in Milwaukee against Marquette. Those are both reasonable. You played number 2 South Carolina. Yeah, you know what's going to happen. That's okay. Credit to Fred Schmiel for making that game happen using his connection. Former assistant under Dawn Staley. It's a good game. It's a good learning experience for this team. But even so, you've got some of the good teams. I think you said it perfectly. You need those comparable teams. There's not comparable teams really in this non-conference besides the Sun Belt Challenge. Fine, yeah, Louisiana, that's a competitive game. You win, awesome. UC Irvine kind of put you in a locker a little bit, 50-75, and then you beat Alaska Anchorage 67-63. So those are pretty competitive. I'm okay with those. Purdue Fort Wayne 56-53. That's a team that's Horizon League opponent, pretty competitive. We saw a good playoff game in the consolation tournament for the men's team 2 years ago between the Mastodons and Bowling Green. So again, a comparable program. That's fine. But Kentucky State, Defiance, Lourdes, Lemoyne. That's 4 in a row that are bad. They're bad teams comparatively to you. They're not on the same level. You win against Kent State, and then it's kind of just all over the place. You lose at Eastern. You lose against Central. You beat NIU, but it's NIU. You beat Western, but it's Western. Lose to Miami. Lose to Ohio. Lose to UMass. Beat Akron. Lose to Toledo. And, you're staring back at that now. You haven't beat a top half team this year. And it's the same boat. You're still looking for that marquee win, and I'm not saying that they didn't play good teams in the non-conference, because they did. The men also played Michigan State. That's a good team. But where is this comparable competition, and how much are you getting out of not playing against teams that are on the same level as you or close to it?
If I'm going to be honest, at the end of the day, I know it looks good and probably sells out the Stro to have these games where you're going to win by 100 points. But at the end of the day, we kind of talked about this hockey. Your goal is to win championships. Blowing out Kentucky State, fun game. Sure, it was fun at the Stro to watch it. No one's going to really remember that in 10 years. They're going to remember if you go to the MAC tournament. They're going to remember if you win the MAC. That's the goal, to win championships.
If you make the dance, they're going to remember that. You're going to get banners.
Your goal is to get banners to hang up in the rafters. Okay, I think if I'm a fan, I would rather you play number 2 South Carolina 10 times and lose every game.
Now, I will say, I do think there's a level where that mismatch, you are just kind of in over your head and not learning. How much do you think... like Kentucky State and Defiance take out of getting shellacked by Bowling Green, 32 to 103, 35 to 118. So, I mean, I think there's diminishing returns against a team as good as number 2 South Carolina, a multi-time national champion juggernaut.
Right.
I mean, I think it's worth it. And again, there's the connection there with Don Staley and Fred Schmiel, so that, it's a little bit different than just your average, when they went to play Iowa and Indiana, not last year, but 2 years ago. So, I mean, there's levels to it.
There's levels, but like Wisconsin,
I'm fine with more of those games. That's a 12-point game against a Big Ten school.
Yeah, it's a close, respectable loss. Again, did you lose? Yeah, but I would rather you go up against bigger opponents and make it competitive, and maybe have a game or two, every once in a while, where you go up against like number 2 and you lose by a bunch, where at least you're learning. Because let's be honest, how are you improving? How are you learning? How are you actually like getting better as a team by playing Kentucky State, then Defiance, then Lords, then Lemoyne?
Yeah,
if anything,
again, as the we've coined it, or recoined it, not that we are the progenitors of this phrase, but the tune-up game. Sure, but like 4 in a row against like
going into MAC play. Like you're going to go. I feel like I'd rather have Wisconsin like right before you're going to lose, but I'd rather have like Wisconsin right before MAC play to like build yourselves up and have a stronger opponent.
Yeah.
But then you're playing lower end talent, conference game. Like you're lulling yourself into a calm almost, and then when it hits you, when it's like we have to play up to this new level, you're not ready for it.
A lot of great coaches say something to the effect of, learning a lot more in the losses than you do in the wins. And, I mean, that's, I think, completely true of the level of competition thing. And, the last thing I'll leave it at is, just confirmation bias. You roll into your MAC opener and you win against Kent State, who, as it has kind of turned out since then, is one of the lower-end teams in the MAC. And, where are you since then? I just don't. Maybe this gripe of ours is indicative of just, kind of personal taste more than it is like the reason that the seasons are both in basically the same spot. You're in the 8th spot, last spot in the MAC tournament, and you're at risk of missing. You need to be more efficient. You're really lacking in that. But it feels like there's kind of those through lines for both teams that kind of guide the problems that we're facing. Is there anything else, any stone left unturned that you want to touch on those, or do you feel pretty
I think
pretty good on it?
We've hit the nail on the head, I think, with just addressing the, I guess, concern about playing like the certain colleges. I think, we spent a lot of time on hockey, which was good, and then addressed, and then, men's and women's basketball too. Like, even if we do have all these things to say, we still do have faith. We still do care heavily about, Coach Simon, Coach Schmiel, the things that are doing.
The fact of the matter is the proof is in the pudding. I believe that these are good coaches. You know what I mean? I've had a lot of time to watch them, and I think that, Derek Vandermeer has, only made good hires and smart decisions since he's been here. Extending Kyle Halleck, extending Lou Snelling for track and field. Landing the Eddie George hire, and the Dennis Williams hire. I think these are all pieces of the puzzle. Promoting Alex Del Piombo. You can go across the board. I don't think there's one of them that you're like, no, this doesn't make sense. But it's getting to the point where you need to see something, and these third seasons, when you've struggled to make an impact in the tournament at all as a first 2 years head coach, to miss in your third year is going to open up some really tough conversations for either of these coaches. So
I always say it feels like for any given season you can find like an asterisk or an excuse for like, oh, we struggle this year, here's a reason why. Eventually you run out of those excuses and you just have to do something and win.
Yeah, and I think like with the health of both teams right now, that's kind of the point we're at. And just have to leave it to the remaining games to kind of play out. And this is my favorite part of any season because there's still a lot of like questions, whatever. But I feel like you have so much more information now. Look at hockey. There's only 4 series left in the regular season. Basketballs are both a little over halfway through their conference slates, basically. So, it's at the point where you're gonna have the answers to these questions one way or another coming up soon. But Yeah. With that, I mean, that's basically all we've got for today. You know, those 3 sports, keeping us busy. But we are going to go ahead and look ahead to the upcoming schedule for Falcon Media Sports Network. As always, you can stay engaged with Falcon Media Sports Network at BG_FMSN on Twitter X or under the BG Falcon Media umbrella on YouTube, as well as Facebook, Instagram, you name it. And you can also check us out at bgfalconmedia.com, where you find written recaps, highlights, and much, much more of our content going on in BG Sports. And at the bottom of bgfalconmedia.com, where you can stream off of Falcon Radio or WBGU 88.1 FM for any of our broadcasts. So with that, we're going to go ahead and take you through the upcoming schedule for Falcon Media Sports Network. Sometime today, the gymnastics team competed against Worcester, Michigan, Wisconsin Eau Claire, and Greenville in Kalamazoo, Michigan at the Broncos. Our own Noah Seeley will have a recap of that available on bgfalconmedia.com. Coming up this Tuesday, the men's basketball team is going to be at home at the Stroh Center taking on Ball State in a conference matchup. Our own Tyler Kavlitz and Foster Rosti will be on the broadcast of that with a 7 p.m. tip-off, so 6:45-ish, 6:30, somewhere in that ballpark for the pregame. Our own Nate Hinners, Andrew Smith, and Andrew Helkowski will be in the studio here for that show, and the recap by Kevin Hutchinson will be on bgfalconmedia.com. Again, that broadcast is going to be on Falcon Radio, as our men's broadcasts tend to be. Women's basketball is in action this Wednesday, also a 7 p.m. tip-off. Our own Lucas Kleinmeyer and Trey Kennedy will be on the call for that. Kevin Hutchinson recapping again, and our own Gavin Gill will be here in the studio. That one is on WBGU 88.1 FM on your radio dial, or, again, you can stream it on bgfalconmedia.com. This Friday, the women's track team will travel to Kent, Ohio to compete in the Doug Raymond Invitational. Our own Adam Duffin will have a recap of that on bgfalconmedia.com. And it really snuck up pretty quickly here, but softball is going to be in action. We're going to get a lot more to talk about when softball and baseball pick up on this show. Softball will be against Queens University in Hampton, Virginia this Friday as well, with 10 a.m. and 1 p.m. games. Our Ben Korak and Dawson Pelter will have previews and recaps for that action on bgfalconmedia.com. Kevin Hutchinson will have a recap of Bowling Green tennis against Bellarmine in Perrysburg, Ohio. And our own Noah and Becca will have photos of that as well. It should be a gallery available on bgfalconmedia.com. And this Friday and Saturday, really the big ticket in my mind, St. Thomas visits the Slater Family Ice Arena. Ben Korak and Kevin Hutchinson will be on the broadcast on Friday night, 7:07 for the puck drop there. 6:07, notice the O in the middle. Dan. Yep. Anyways, 6:07 puck drop for Ben Korak and Vaughn Ullum's broadcast on Saturday night. Gavin Gill will be in the boardroom for that on Saturday. Our board operator will be Nate Hinners again on Friday. Recap from Nathan Burkett on Friday for that St. Thomas series. I will be on the recap for Saturday. You can check both of those out on bgfalconmedia.com as always. You can also catch a recap of Falcon Gymnastics this Friday, track and field finishing Saturday from Noah and Dan respectively. Last but certainly not least, on February 7th, women's basketball hosts Coastal Carolina at the Stroh Center. Adam Duffin and Trey Kennedy, 2 very talented freshman broadcasters, will be on the call for that one. That's a 2 p.m. tip-off. Our own Artie Abrego and Sam Bork will be in the studio for that, and you can check out a recap by Noah Seeley on that one. Last but not least, we'll have a recap from Andrew Smith on men's basketball on Saturday. That game tips off around 3 p.m., so you can tune in for around after that game's conclusion, about 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock or so, and Andrew Smith will have you recapped on that one. As always, check out bgfalconmedia.com, like I said, to stay up to date with everything going on in the world of Falcon athletics. But that's going to do it for us here from the Zig Zone. So for Nathan Burkett and Dan Reidenauer, myself, Holden Ruck, we're saying, "I Ziggy," and have a good night, everyone.